The government says its new legislation will prevent third parties from having undue influence in elections, but there was already a law that limited spending to about $600,000 in the 6 months before an election. The new bill says that limit applies over 12 months, not 6. The election is June 2nd next year, so the legislation started affecting attack ads earlier this month.
So when Doug Ford says that he's for the people, which people do you feel he's talking about?
The 1%, maybe?
Ontario Working Families has ads like this. It took the government to court over the bill and won, in part because the government's own lawyers had evidence that said 6 months was long enough for a spending limit.
Part of the test for whether something is reasonable is, does it minimally impair people's rights? And what the judge said was, well, if 6 months is okay and would have achieved the government's aims of preventing too much third-party influence in elections, if 6 months is enough, then 12 can't be minimal. And so he struck it down for that reason.
Brock political scientist Matthew Henniger says it's perplexing that the government would risk public outrage over the notwithstanding clause and ignore charter rights for something like an election law. Political analyst Keith Leslie agrees.
It's a very, very heavy tool, the nuclear option of constitutional debates, as they call it, and to use it for election financing reform seems like way overkill.
Ford also threatened the notwithstanding clause when the court said he was wrong to slash the size of Toronto City Council, but a higher court overturned the ruling on appeal, so the clause wasn't needed.
I think it's reckless because it's treating our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is something that Canadians, Ontarians hold dear and value, as we should. It treats it like a political doormat.
He's ramming through this brutal power grab at a time when we're still in a pandemic.
Keith Leslie says the government appears greedy.
Another part of this bill doubled the campaign contribution limits to about $3,400. That will always favor a sitting government. And that's where the government seems to be here. So it's silencing its critics, and it's building up its own coffers ahead of the election while limiting what others can get. It's very self-serving.
In order for the government to pass the bill with the notwithstanding clause and thwart any opposition stalling tactics, the legislature will sit throughout this weekend, including overnight on Saturday. But the bill is expected to pass on Monday, given that the Progressive Conservatives do have a majority government. Lisa Hefner, CHCH News.